My daughter-in-law gave away my jewels, thinking I didn't need them. She never saw my revenge coming. I opened the safe the same way I always did. 3 turns to the right, 2 to the left, 1 more. Click. But this time, that sound wasn't reassuring. It was final. Inside, there was nothing. Empty. All my jewelry gone. I turned around and saw Valerie leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, a smug smile curling on her lips. Mom, we donated everything. You don't need those things anymore. I looked straight into her eyes, my voice calm, almost cold. You're right, Valerie. I don't need them anymore. But you will need a lawyer. Her face turned pale, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt something return to me, control over my own life. They say the scariest thing about growing old is loneliness, but no one ever told me that something far worse exists when the person you trust the most turns around and takes everything you ever had. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there staring at her, realizing this wasn't about jewelry anymore. This was the beginning of a war. A war I never thought a 68-year-old widow like me would ever have to fight. But before I tell you how I took everything back, you need to understand how it all began. After Ernest, my husband of more than 40 years, passed away, my world shattered. The house felt enormous, echoing with memories. Every morning, the coffee cup across the table stayed full. No one left to drink it. Out of my 4 children, 3 had moved away, each with their own lives. Only Robert, my youngest, the one I was most proud of, still lived in the same city. One afternoon, he brought Valerie home. She was beautiful, young, with eyes as sweet as honey. When she handed me a bouquet of sunflowers and said, "I'm so happy to meet you, Mom," it felt like the sun had returned after a long winter. I believed it was the start of a warm new chapter. But I was wrong. It was the opening scene of a tragedy. When Robert and Valerie married, I was truly happy. I helped plan their wedding, paid part of the venue, even baked a small cake myself. Then one day, as she poured me coffee, Valerie said gently, "Mom, your house is so big. It must be lonely living here all by yourself. Why don't we move in? That way, we can take care of you." I agreed without hesitation. I was grateful for the company, the laughter echoing through the quiet halls. But that laughter soon turned into orders, control, and silent wounds. At first, it was little things. Let's replace the sofa. Let's repaint the kitchen cabinets. Let's clear out the old stuff. I thought, she's young. Maybe a little change will brighten the place up. But then things started slipping out of my hands. Valerie asked me to sign papers to make online payments easier. She said, "You shouldn't worry about money anymore." I signed, never realizing it was a bank authorization form. One day, I tried to withdraw money to buy my granddaughter a birthday gift. My wallet was empty. My card was gone. When I asked, Valerie smiled sweetly. "You don't need money anymore, Mom. I'll handle everything." From that day on, every dollar in my own home had to be approved. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I spoke up, Robert would take her side and leave. But that fear turned me into a prisoner in my own home. She started controlling even the air I breathed. "Mom, you wake up too early, it keeps me up. Don't go to the book club, it's too cold outside. You should stay home. We'll handle things." Bit by bit, my life was taken from me. Friends called less often. And one day, my dearest friend asked, "Are you okay? Your daughter-in-law said you've been forgetful and the doctor advised you to stay indoors." I froze. Valerie had told everyone I was losing my mind. When I confronted her, she smiled again, sweet as ever. "Just a misunderstanding, Mom." But in her eyes, I saw victory. That night, I sat alone on the sofa listening to the steady ticking of the clock, and I realized if I didn't do something soon, I'd disappear completely. I remembered Patrick Miller, Ernest's old friend, the man who had practiced law with him for over 30 years. I called him. "Patrick, I've lost everything. I've been deceived. In my own home. His voice grew firm. Don't say anything else over the phone. Come see me tomorrow. Ernest once told me if you ever needed help, I'd be there. The next day, I told him everything. When I finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me with quiet gravity. This is elder financial abuse, but we can get everything back. You just need to be patient. So we made a plan. I opened a new bank account, moved what was left of my money, hired a private investigator to trace the transactions, and most importantly, I began recording every word Valerie said. I pretended to be weak, submissive, harmless, so she wouldn't suspect a thing. And every cruel remark, every boastful word of greed, I saved them all. Then came my birthday. A year ago, Ernest had given me white roses. This year, Valerie threw a party for her friends in my house. When I came downstairs, she said lightly, "Mom, you can rest upstairs. We'll be noisy." I sat in the dark, listening to the laughter below, until I heard her voice clearly. Robert's almost convinced. "The old woman's going to a nursing home soon. This house will be ours." I stood up. No tears, just a coldness sharp as steel. I called Patrick. It's time. A week later, that same house became my own courtroom. Patrick arrived with my other 3 children, Lauren, Charles, and Patricia. When Robert walked in, I pressed play. Valerie's voice filled the room, cruel and clear. "Once she signs the papers, she won't have any rights left." Robert froze. Valerie panicked, insisting it was fake. Patrick laid photos of my jewelry in a pawn shop on the table, along with bank records showing nearly $90,000 withdrawn. Each piece of evidence hit Robert like a slap. He fell to his knees before me. "Mom, I'm sorry, I was blind." Valerie, trembling, signed a written confession, agreed to return the money, and left the house, renouncing any claim to inheritance. When the door closed behind her, I felt the air lighten as if the house itself had been freed from a ghost. 6 months passed. I recovered everything, every jewel, every dollar. Robert divorced her, started over, and slowly became the son I once knew. I went back to my book club, bought flowers at the morning market, cooked my own meals, and smiled at the sound of birds outside. I had regained it all, not just my possessions, but my dignity, the very thing Valerie thought she could erase. I realized justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it begins the moment you have the courage to say enough. They can steal your belongings, but they can never take your dignity unless you let them. That morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, reflecting off the pearl necklace I had just gotten back. I held it in my palm, its cool touch reminding me of something deeper. Each piece returned to me along with a memory, not because of its value, but because it bore witness to a life I had lived, loved, and sacrificed for. Ernest used to say, "Possessions only mean something when they come with honor." I smiled. Maybe he was watching, proud that I had finally learned to stand tall. Robert came over carrying a vase of sunflowers. "Do you remember the first day your daughter-in-law brought these to the house?" I asked softly. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I do, and I'm sorry for letting you go through all that." I brushed his hair gently, just like when he was a child. "No one's born knowing right from wrong, son. What matters is learning when to stop before you lose everything." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rustle of leaves outside. Robert placed my hand in his, warm and trembling. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer alone. One late autumn afternoon, a letter arrived. Beige envelope. No return address. Inside, a single page, handwriting shaky. "I thought I could take everything from you. But dignity cannot be stolen. I'm sorry." I read it again and again, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my pearls. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means freeing yourself from hatred. I had won, but my greatest victory wasn't over her. It was over the fear that once ruled me. That night, I sat on the porch, the soft light from the lamp reflecting in my teacup. In the backyard, the roses Ernest once planted were in full bloom. I placed one in a vase, breathed in its gentle scent. No more shouting, no more cold stares, only the wind and peace. Freedom, I thought, isn't about running away. It's about feeling safe again in the home that's truly yours. If you're listening to this story and see yourself somewhere within it, don't stay silent. Speak. Stand up. Protect what's yours. Because when you stay quiet, others will rewrite your life for you. I once stayed silent and almost lost everything, but one strong word, enough, can change your destiny. Each morning now, I brew my coffee, open the window, and let the light spill into the kitchen. The drip of water, the steady tick of the clock, the birds calling to one another in the garden together, they make the melody of a new life. I don't need anyone to protect me anymore. I have myself, I have justice, and I have the truth. And the truth is the brightest light, one no one can put out. They used to say I was weak. Maybe they were right. But out of that weakness, I found strength. From the place of betrayal, I found my self-respect. And from loss, I learned this. The more certain things are taken from you, the tighter you must hold what remains your dignity and your faith in yourself. I closed the door, listened to the wind along the porch, and smiled. Life in the end is fair in its own quiet way. Time drifted by like smoke, and I realized I'd stopped counting days. Winter mornings were no longer cold because warmth had returned to this house. Robert still lived with me, not yet moved into the new apartment he was fixing up. Every evening when I heard his steps in the kitchen and the clink of spoon against cup, I smiled. He always made me tea the way Ernest used to. Sometimes he sat beside me and said, hesitant, "Mom, I've been thinking, maybe Valerie was hurt once, and that's how she became who she is." I nodded. Maybe. But you know, being hurt doesn't give anyone the right to hurt others. We all have choices. He fell quiet, then murmured, "I know. I just hope she finds her conscience." I thought of Valerie's letter. I hadn't answered. Not out of hatred, because I didn't need to. Forgiveness doesn't have to be heard. It only has to be lived. Inside me, the storm had passed. I chose silence, not the old silence of fear, but the kind that comes with peace. One March morning, the phone rang. Unknown number. A polite female voice introduced herself as Attorney Herrera, representing Valerie. A chill went through me. "She wants to see me," I asked. "Yes, only once. She has something to say." I hesitated. Patrick, ever my anchor, said at once, "Go. I'll go with you." The next day, in a bright office, I saw Valerie again. She was thinner eyes, tired, dark circles, deep hair undone. For the first time, I didn't see an enemy, only someone who had lost everything. She didn't look up. She spoke softly. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I want to end this. My grandmother left me an apartment worth $90,000. I want to transfer it to you to pay what I owe." Patrick checked the documents and nodded. "Valid." I looked at Valerie for a long moment. "You could sell it and pay me back over time. Why give it all?" She broke down. "Because I need it to end. I can't live with this guilt every day." I was silent. A part of me wanted to refuse to make her pay longer. Then I remembered myself, the woman who once lived in fear, who knelt under humiliation and still stood up again. I said quietly, "I'll accept, but write one more thing. In your own hand. Confess everything, what you did, what you said, every lie." Valerie didn't hesitate. Her pen shook as she wrote, "I, Valerie Ramirez, admit to deceiving, taking from, and hurting Mrs. Beatrice Miller." When she signed, I set down my pen and didn't look again. "It's done," I said. "From now on, we owe each other nothing." A week later, the apartment was in my name. I didn't see it as a trophy, but as proof that justice, slow as it is, arrives. I handed the keys to Robert. "Fix it up," I said. "Let it be your fresh start." He choked up. "Mom, I don't deserve it." I took his hand. You learned your father's lesson: mistakes don't define us. How we make them right, that's what does. 3 months later, that apartment was full of sun walls painted warm beige, small plants on the balcony. Robert did everything himself. On the day it was finished, he said, "Mom, I'm not moving yet. I'll stay with you a while longer." I smiled. "As long as you like. But remember, this place stands for the fact that we can rebuild no matter how broken things once were." Life went on in ordinary days, the simple happiness I once overlooked. I read, shopped at the market, arranged flowers, and now and then wrote to old friends urging them never to let anyone control their wallet or their voice. I once believed old age makes you powerless, that losing a husband means losing your anchor. But now I know no one is weak who still holds on to themselves. A year later, on my 69th birthday, I woke, opened the window, and saw all 4 of my children in the yard holding a cake, smiling bright. "Happy birthday, Mom." My tears fell, but they were happy tears. No more fights, no shadow of Valerie, only laughter, the clink of cups, and the smell of something good on the grill. I looked around and saw Ernest smiling from the photo on the wall. That evening, after everyone left, I sat with Robert on the porch. "I've met someone, Mom," he said. "A teacher named Andrea. She's gentle and honest and doesn't care about money." I looked into my son's eyes and felt at peace. "Take it slow. This time, choose with your heart, not with the emptiness." He nodded. "I'll never let anyone into my life if it means losing you again." Before bed, I looked around the house, tidy, bright, warm. I touched the safe where my jewelry lay neatly in place. I didn't open it every day anymore because I didn't need to see them to know they were there, like my pride. I turned out the light and breathed in the scent of roses from outside. In the dark, I whispered, "Thank you, Ernest, for teaching me to be strong. You see, I kept everything: my home, my child, myself." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in years. In my dream, Ernest sat on the old garden chair, smiling at me in the golden sun. No anger, no fear. Only a woman who had lifted her head and walked through the storm and found her own light again. The next morning, birds chirped at the window. Sunlight fell across the white curtains, so gentle I thought I was still dreaming. I made coffee, and the kitchen filled with its warm fragrance. Today, I told myself I will write my story not to lament, but to remind other women that they are stronger than they think. I sat at the table, opened the new brown leather notebook Patricia had given me. On the first page, I wrote, "Blood may betray, but justice and self-respect endure." My pen moved across the paper, each line releasing the last of the ache. I wasn't writing with anger anymore, but with gratitude. Because without the hurt, I might never have learned my worth. That afternoon, Patrick visited. He set a newspaper on the table. In a small corner was an article about elder financial abuse, mentioning my story with the names hidden. He smiled. "Your story gave people courage. They wrote to say thank you." I looked at him, moved. "Patrick, if Ernest were here, he'd be grateful to you." He answered softly, "I only kept Ernest's promise to protect you." We both laughed, light as an autumn breeze. That night, Robert came home late with Andrea, the teacher I'd heard about. A small woman with earnest eyes bowed slightly. "I've heard so much about you, ma'am. I hope one day we can teach our children about courage, the kind you have." I smiled, a quiet tenderness rising in me. For the first time, the future didn't scare me. It felt like a door opening. After dinner, we sat on the porch. The moon was bright silver, washing over the rose garden. "Mom, do you ever regret it?" Robert asked. "For forgiving her for letting go so soon?" I shook my head. "No. Forgiveness isn't because they deserve it. It's because I refuse to stay bound to hatred. When you release it, you become truly free." He nodded, eyes shining. I knew he understood. Night settled in. I watched the lights across the street and felt lighter than I ever had. Maybe not everyone gets back what they've lost, but anyone can find peace if they're brave enough to walk through the dark. I had feared everything once: poverty, loneliness, betrayal. But at last I learned the most frightening thing is not believing in yourself. When I began to believe I deserved respect, the world somehow began to believe it too. Before bed, I looked into the mirror. Time was etched across my face, but in my eyes there was something brighter, deeper, as if a small flame inside me would never go out. I whispered to myself, "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for still being here." The next day, I sent my first journal essay to the local paper, the one that publishes pieces by older adults. A few weeks later, they wrote back asking me to join them long-term for a column called The Voice of Mothers. I laughed. Who would have thought the woman once silenced would one day be heard? I said yes. Because if my story can help even one woman say no to injustice, then everything I endured is worth it. On the year's final night, I wrote the closing lines of that first piece. We can't choose who will love us truly, but we can choose not to let anyone take our self-respect. Remember, dignity is never a gift. It is the shield we must hold, no matter how many times the world tries to tear it away. I set down my pen and heard the clock strike 12. A new year had begun. I closed the notebook, blew out the candle, and in that warm darkness I whispered, I have lost family, but I kept the truth and my freedom. And that is all a person needs to go on without bowing ever again. On the morning of January 1st, the air felt impossibly fresh. I opened the door, letting in the cold, the scent of grass and damp earth. The neighborhood was still, with just a few rays of sun threading through the trees. Robert was still asleep, Andrea resting her head on his shoulder, so peaceful that I quietly closed the door so they wouldn't wake. I stepped into the garden and picked up the fallen petals beaded with dew. Each flower, each leaf brought back the path I'd walked, long nights of fear, days when my voice was stolen, and the moment I stood up to what had seemed impossible. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and turned on the radio. A program was telling the stories of women who stood against abuse at home. The host's voice was slow and steady. Each time a woman dares to tell the truth, the next generation becomes a little freer. I smiled. Maybe my voice had joined theirs at last. In the afternoon, I visited Ernest's grave. The wind was gentle, the sky clear, a field of dry grass stretching far. I laid a bouquet of white roses on the stone and bowed my head for a long time. My love, I said, I did it. Our house has laughter again. Our son knows how to love the right way. And I at last know that living means not being afraid. The wind lifted the ribbon on the bouquet as if answering me. I smiled, tears falling my heart as light as cloud. That evening, the family gathered on the porch. Charles strummed the guitar. Lauren and Patricia sang. Andrea sat beside me and asked softly, "Do you have regrets? If you could go back, would you give Valerie another chance?" I looked out at the yard where moonlight fell in long, bright bands. If I could go back, I said, I would still let her in. Because without her, I would never have learned how strong I am. Andrea squeezed my hand, eyes shining. You know, that's what I admire most. You didn't just survive, you overcame. I laughed. Survival is instinct, dear. Overcoming that is a choice. The words felt like the final period of an old chapter. When everyone went inside, I stayed a while watching the night settle. The moon hung high, bright as the pearl I once lost. I thought of other women, those still sitting in the dark, silent with fear. I want them to hear my voice, to know that silence is never the answer. The next day, my first article was published. Hundreds of comments poured in, messages of thanks, stories from people who had been deceived and stripped of everything by their own children, by family. One woman named Margaret wrote, "I thought I was weak, but after hearing your story, I called my lawyer. Today I got my house back." I cried, not out of pity, but out of joy. My voice had traveled farther than I ever imagined, carrying the scars that had finally healed. That afternoon, Patrick called. "You see," he said, The truth always finds a way to spread. It's like light, no matter how much you try to cover it, it slips through the cracks. I nodded. You're right, Patrick. And sometimes one small crack is all it takes to save a life. In March, I received an invitation to appear on a TV panel about financial abuse within families. I hesitated, then decided to go. When the studio lights came on, the host asked, "What gave you the courage to stand up after so much pain?" I looked into the camera, my voice steady. Because I realized if I didn't stand up, people like Valerie would keep existing. And if I stayed silent, women like me would always be seen as weak. I don't want the next generation to live in fear the way I once did. After that show, I received hundreds of letters. Even men wrote, "Your story made me rethink how I treat my mother." I never expected the truth to travel so far. Time passed and my life settled into peace again. But each time I looked at the safe where the jewelry rested quietly, I didn't see possessions anymore. I saw chapters of my life. The gold bracelet, Ernest's proposal. The pearl necklace, the year I became a mother. The diamond ring, the day Ernest first called me his partner in life. And next to them, I placed a single sheet of paper, confirmation of a withdrawn case settled peacefully. I kept it not as a trophy, but as a reminder that true justice sometimes means knowing when to stop. One evening, Robert sat beside me, teacup in hand. "Mom," he said, "I'm going to propose to Andrea. I think it's time." I smiled, warmth rising in my chest. "Do what you believe is right, son. But remember, never let love become control." He nodded, and in his eyes I saw Ernest again. The wedding was simple, held in the garden behind our home. I stood beside Patrick, watching Robert hold Andrea's hands beneath the rose arch. When they exchanged rings, I saw a reflection of Ernest in me long ago, and for the first time in ages, I laughed without feeling the weight in my chest. That night, when the guests had gone, I sat alone, a glass of wine in my hand, bathed in soft golden light from the porch. I whispered, "I did it, Ernest. I kept my promise to protect this home, to keep my dignity, and to teach our children what fairness truly means." The night breeze carried the scent of roses, mingled with faint laughter in the distance. I closed my eyes and saw it all again: the house, the light, the people I love, and the man who left, but never truly disappeared. I understood then, justice isn't only a verdict. Justice is the moment your heart stops trembling, the moment you can look at your pain and smile. And when I tell this story, it isn't to remember Valerie. It's to remind us all that no matter who tries to take what's yours, no one can steal the truth from a person who stands tall. That's what I've learned, and what I wish to leave behind. I looked around the house, warm light still spilling across Ernest's photo. Outside, the wind stirred the rose petals softly, as if the past itself whispered, "You did it." I smiled, not bitterly this time, but with pride. This story, once a private wound, I now know it isn't just mine. It belongs to every woman who was ever called weak, ever dismissed, ever silenced out of fear of losing love. And if you're listening to me now and you feel that same ache in your heart, remember this: you are not alone. Don't let anyone convince you that you are unworthy of respect. Don't let age, loneliness, or blind affection silence your voice. Stand up. Speak. Take back what's yours, not with anger, but with pride. Because dignity is never a gift. It's a flame you must protect, no matter who tries to extinguish it. If my story touched you, let me know with a comment, a share, or simply a whisper, "I understand." And if you believe someone out there needs to hear this, send it to them. Maybe with just one click, you'll help another person find themselves again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the real stories of women whose hearts are stronger than their pain. I'm Voices from Auntie May, and this is where we tell heal and rise together. Because no matter who you are or how old you may be, you have the right to be free, to be loved, and to be respected. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next episode where together we'll find strength again in life's smallest, most beautiful moments.